Okay, welcome back to the 144,000 project. This will be video 8, and we're on You Are Gods. This is our channel Rev9 video, and you can see the last one we had here is 6. So once I get these loaded, I'll update with what we're doing right now. And we just left off. We were at, this is Genesis. You can get that on my website, this PDF, You Are God. So we're at 26,235, and I just kind of read a little bit about that. But this was about the prophecies that were given to Abraham are now being passed down to Isaac. Okay. Isaac went to Abimelech. Of course, this would be the son of the previous Abimelech. So then the ever-living appeared to him in a vision. So again, that's Christ the angel. Descend not to Egypt. Dwell where I promised you, remain in this land, even though there was a famine, it said. So, I will be with you and will bless you. So, there's a famine, but he tells them, let's just stay here, there's a famine, but I'll bless you, right? Okay. For you and your race, I'll give the whole of this country. You and your race means you and your posterity. Okay, I will complete the oath which I swore to father. So, the oath was not completed then, right? I will complete the oath. So the oath then he gave to Abraham is not completed. Alright? I will increase your race like the stars of the sky. See, so that was the oath, is that your race, your posterity is going to be as the stars of the sky. So it won't even be completed with Ishmael, you know. I mean with Isaac. It won't be completed until many years after they came out of Egypt in reality. So obviously that oath continues on until all the things that this oath contains are all done, but Christ has to come from their posterity at some point, so that's part of the oath. In fact, since we know Christ is coming back, that has to be done before the oath to Abraham is complete. The oath to Abraham is not complete right now because Christ hasn't come back, and that's part of these prophecies that were promised to the posterity of Abraham. So until all these prophecies in Scripture are complete, the oath is not finished. Okay? I'll bless all the nations of the earth through your heirs. The heir is Christ that he's speaking to, and the nations of the earth are the nations of Abraham, or the 12 tribes, right? Okay, in accordance with what I promised to Abraham, according to my words, if you will carefully keep my commands and statutes and laws. So, the point is, Abraham kept his commands and statutes and laws. Okay? He created a justice system. He followed God's law. And then eventually that law is what Moses writes down. Christ comes to him on the mountain, writes it on a tablet, gives it to Moses, and then eventually they make more tablets, replacement. At any rate, Abraham was following God's law. So we talk about the law of Moses. In fact, we should be talking about the law of Abraham, because that's what we can see right here from the text. Now, the man in the place asked about his wife. She is my sister. Alright, so he said the same thing Abraham said. Thus the men of the place should murder him for Rebekah, for she was very beautiful to look on. Oh, wait a minute. And that we just said? Oh, yeah. If we back up to 24:16, remember I said the girl was very beautiful to look upon, a maiden who had no sweetheart, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that was talking about Rebekah. So she was beautiful back there, so she's beautiful up here. Okay. And then Abimelech, I guess it was, you know, the king was looking out, saw Isaac sporting with Rebekah. Okay, yeah. So then he says, well, she's your wife, of course, because if you're having sex, you're married, and that's all there is to it, so. But he explains he was afraid he'd be killed. Better if he was considered to be her brother, in other words. So at any rate, yeah, he didn't apparently give him a whole bunch of things, or it doesn't say anything right here about him giving him Isaac, but he sent him away and said anybody that touches him, he'll die. Okay. So I wrote on here, which we've kind of already been through, because that was in Hebrews 11:18, the illustration of the redeeming abilities of Christ, the heir, who was prophesied to come from his posterity, which we were just reading about here, was the fact that they were both restored to a youthful age, possibly 25 to 30 and 35 years of age, so they could birth Isaac. Okay, Isaac knew it, so that was an illustration. They were then first recognized as gods, or people who had a direct connection to the Creator, okay, by the fact that, you know, just what we read before, they considered Abraham to be a god. Well, yeah, because they'd never seen such a thing. Therefore, his offspring, Isaac, came from that restoration to life. So then they're looking at Isaac in the same light, in other words. And of course, it's not like people didn't know that these things that were promised to Abraham were passed to Isaac and all that kind of thing. Sure, people knew that, and Isaac told it to, you know, his kids. So whatever. The reasoning of Abraham mentioned in Hebrews that God would raise Isaac from the dead after he offered him as a holocaust, which means burnt offering, as Christ told him to do. Okay. Add to this fact that the King of Righteousness, Prince of Peace, had already prophesied over Abraham, helped him in the battle with the kings when he went to get Lot, shielded him or Sarah in the incident with King Abimelech, okay, and then gave him visions of his posterity in the future, which is what we're now reading about. Okay. Quote, Psalm 151. Oh, that's a good one. The vision of Jacob's ladder. It's Christ at the top with other angels ascending and descending, of course. Now we don't actually get a whole lot about Isaac necessarily, and that just on the next chapter here when we get to 28. However, it says the ever-living promised him, and that's 26:13. What were we just looking at? Okay, 26:2-5, yeah. So then we get to verse 13. I think he mentioned that ever-living promised him. He increased, thus the man traveled and increased until he was very great. So that's 26:13-14. Flocks of sheep, herds of cattle, many servants, so that people were envious of him, especially the Philistines. Okay. Yeah, so it talks about Isaac. Well of strife. Blah, blah, blah. Went there in the well of oath. That was a well that Abraham dug. And the ever-living appeared to him. That's verse 24. So here's Christ appearing to him in a dream. I am the God of your father Abraham. Fear not, I am with you and will bless you and increase your race because of my servant Abraham. So that's 24. Alright, well that's, I am with you is the whole idea of Christ the shield. So that's from Genesis 15:1. Now he's repeating that same thing to Isaac. Increasing your race is a prophecy. So it's just telling you the same things I promised to Abraham. I'm going to do that for you. Okay. Okay, and then here again, they recognize, this is Abimelech, in verse 26, the general of his army, you are my enemies. Alright, we are terribly afraid because God is with you, verse 28. So this king and other people around him recognized that he was blessed by God. So how is that? You look at somebody today, how do people know that you're blessed by God? Well, back then, everything just works out in your favor, but obviously there's other things going on. It just doesn't tell us everything. You are now the blessed of the ever-living. Verse 29, here again, twice. They know God's with you. You're blessed of the ever-living. So, okay. Well of satisfaction, that's verse 33. Alright, then Esau took a wife, Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, Bashmite, Besmath, daughter of Elian Hittite. They were bitter wind to Isaac and Rebekah. So So many years have passed now. So and then we get this little story of how Jacob got the blessing, stole the blessing from Esau. Well, okay, but already before that, okay, before we get over here to what it says about Jacob stealing the blessings, we actually remember the prophecy, the elder shall serve the younger. That's back in 25, starting at verse 23. Two nations, two peoples, one stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger. Okay, so he had blessings. We kind of went through that, and of course that was up in Romans, I guess, that we looked at. Okay. So, in fact, that and then I mentioned that it was up to, we looked at Romans 9:12. At any rate, so the whole idea of him having mercy on one and not another, we've been through all that, and that was the whole point here. Jacob was predestinated. Esau was rejected. So the fact that all of this worked out in Jacob's favor was already prophetic. Otherwise, how could the elder serve the younger? So it was prophecy. It was predestinated that this would happen. So we can say that, he stole it from Esau, but no, it was actually something that God had already predetermined. And so he just put it in Rebecca's, gave her the idea of how to make it come about. Maybe she thought she was doing it. Who knows? At any rate, it was predestinated. So then he got this blessing from Isaac, and this will be 27:28. God will give you the dew from the skies, fatness of the earth, increase in possession. Nations shall serve you and bow down to you. Yes, a multitude of mighty people with your brothers also shall pay tribute to you, my son. So, if any curses you, he shall be cursed. If anyone blesses you, he shall be blessed. Yeah, but that's all about the 12 tribes, because that's where the 12 tribes are going to come from. These nations, all about this prophecy of the 12 tribes, which we see later in 49, the blessing to Joseph on Ephraim and Manasseh. You see, they're the ones that actually will rule over the 12 tribes. That's the blessing. So it increases from here, but then it's defined when we get up there to Jacob's blessing on the 12 tribes in 49:24 approximately, that area. That's where it's defined. Okay, so all of these prophecies expand as you're going along. Alright, so we know that. It's called tripper up. Tripper up. That was what Jacob means. Tripper up in Hebrew. Okay, and then we get 37. Isaac replied to Esau, since I have made him your master. Okay, so that was prophesied. I've given all his brothers to him for servants. Well, he didn't have brothers. Okay. All his brothers to him for servants. And with increase in possession I have endowed him. Except, if you back up, that's what it said in 29. Nations will serve you and bow down to you. Yes, a multitude of mighty people with your brothers also shall pay tribute to you. So he thinks he's speaking to Esau. In fact, he's speaking to Jacob. And he's talking about Jacob's brothers. But Jacob didn't have any brothers. So he's actually talking about kinsmen, which were these offspring of Abraham through Hagar or through Keturah. That would be the only brothers, because that's his relatives. So he's going to rule over his relatives from those other two wives of Abraham. That's the only brothers he could be. Or he's talking about the future 12 tribes. It's only, how else are you going to look at it? The only brothers you have. Or, obviously, the offspring of Esau. You can look at it as that. Okay, so either way, it's a prophecy, and he is relating a prophecy to him in 27, starting there at 28. Nations will serve you, bow down to you. So he's giving a prophecy. A multitude of people with your brothers shall also pay tribute to you. So if you look, he thinks he's speaking to Esau, but if he's the prophecy is actually for Jacob, even though he thinks he's talking to Esau, the prophecy is for Jacob. Then his brothers could be Esau's. He has 3 wives, and then we get a list later, I guess, of his offspring, all his posterity from those wives, in other words. So that could be the brothers that he's talking about Jacob will rule over, even though he's thinking he's talking to Esau ruling over Jacob's brothers. In fact, it's the opposite. Okay? Hopefully everybody gets that. Alright. But then when you get down to 40, he says, you'll extend and you shall break his yoke from off your neck. So saying that Esau will break the yoke of Jacob from his neck when he extends, it says. And Esau will live by the sword, but will serve your brother. That's verse 40. So it's 27:40. Okay. But Esau hated Jacob for the blessing. Yeah, because he's basically living by the sword, so that's perpetual war, right? So saying that Esau is going to live by basically perpetual war, serving his brother Jacob, even though he's the elder. Okay, but it was already prophesied when they were born, so it's predestinated. So now Esau's going to kill him and so forth. So he goes to Laban. Consequently, you go down to 28. Okay, and this was 12. So, starting in 28, Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him and commanded him not to take a wife from the girls of Canaan. Yeah, which is what Esau did. So he told Isaac not to do that. Of course. Well, the only reason he told him not to do that because it was already understood you didn't go marry, Canaanite wives or whatever, Philistines or any of that. You didn't do that. That was part of his law. Now we know Isaac, if it said, we already read it, if you follow my law, these blessings, that was back in 26, 5 and 6, if you will carefully keep my commands, statutes, and law. So this has to be his commands, statutes, laws that Isaac is telling to Jacob. It has to be. He just said, you have to follow my commandments, my laws. Well, Isaac ain't making this up. Isaac's doing what he was already told, following the law. And then these blessings, it was passed on to Abraham, his father, will continue on. Well, obviously, he knows that that's how he came into existence. So he's not going to violate his law now. Of course, he's going to follow his law, and he's going to command, and maybe, he understands, at least by this point, he just gave a prophecy to both of them. So maybe he gets it that Jacob was favored, and maybe he knows or remembers, because it said this prophecy back here in, 25, the Lord said to her, that's his wife, see? Rebecca. So, it says the Lord gave this prophecy to Rebecca, that the elder shall serve the younger. Isaac was 60 when they were born. Okay. So it doesn't actually say that Isaac knew what this prophecy was, because it said it gave it to his wife, but we have to assume that she probably told him about the prophecy because it was obviously a vision from Christ, so on and so forth. So, and then he has a vision, okay, about keeping the commands, right? So he got that vision. It says the ever-living appeared to him in a vision. Okay, that's 26:2. So he got a vision. So apparently then he understands, when we get over here to 28, you don't take a wife at some point he understands, has to understand that's part of God's law. It's not something he just made up, because it's passed on. We get farther on down the line, we can see that, well, all throughout, there's a number of scriptures that we can get to. There's no point in going through all that right here, but yes, it's passed on, it's in his law in multiple places. We'll get to that as we come to it. Alright, so 28. Don't take a wife. Go to your mother's father. Take a wife from there and the daughters of Laban. Okay. Your mother's brother. And may Almighty God bless you. So send Jacob off. Send that Christ will bless him, make you fruitful and increase, and you may become an assembly of nations. Wow. Okay. So where did that come from? Because we don't read about the assembly of nations. I mean, it talks about nations coming from Abraham. So now he's passing this prophecy about all the nations, the stars of the sky, and blah, 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 coming through, passing that on to Jacob. But it said great nation originally. When we were back in chapter 12, it was great nation. Now it's an assembly of nations. And then later on, we're going to see that assembly goes to Joseph, and then that assembly is given dominance over the other 12 tribes. All right? They give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your race with you, in other words, your posterity, inherit the land of your strangerhood which God gave to Abraham. Okay, so he's passing along to Jacob the prophecies that were given to Abraham. All right? Thus Isaac sent off Jacob. Right? So he sent him off with the prophecies that came from Abraham. And then Esau's like in verse 6 about not taking a wife from the girls of Canaan, which he'd already done. He says that, and then Esau realizes that Jacob listened to the voice of his fathers. He didn't, but Jacob did, right? Then Esau perceived that the girls of Canaan were displeasing. Okay, so Esau went to Ishmael, right? So he did the best he could and went to Ishmael. So they knew where the Ishmaelites, of course, they knew they were his brothers and all that kind of thing. Okay, so obviously Jacob set out the well of the oath, and so on and so forth. And then we get down to 28:12. Then he dreamed and saw a ladder, so he took one of the stones of the place and put it for his pillow. That's verse 11. That's where we get Jacob's pillow stone. Then he laid down on the spot. He dreamed, saw a ladder with its foot standing on the ground and its head reaching to the heavens, and there were messengers, in other words, angels of God. So the angels were ascending and descending. And he saw the ever-living stationed above. So he's looking at Christ, the Son of God, with other angels going up and down the ladder. Okay. I am the ever-living God of your father Abraham. Right. So that's Melchizedek standing up there looking down. So I'll give you the land to you and your race shall be like the dust of the earth, and it shall spread west, east, north, and south, and all the nations of the world shall be benefited by you and your heir. Well, the heir he's talking about here is Christ himself. So that's just amazing when you think about it. He's looking at Christ, you know, which he knows is Melchizedek or whatever. I mean, we don't know what Jacob called Christ. He knew about the prophecies. He would have known the word Melchizedek, if that's in fact what the word they used, or he would have known him as this entity called the shield or whatever. I don't know. The ever-living. All these different terms have been used up to here, so we don't know exactly what Jacob called him here. But he's saying your offspring will go west, east, north, and south. So his offspring, in other words, they're going to be as the dust of the earth. They're going to spread out. They're not in Jerusalem. It says right there they're going to spread out over the whole earth. Because it said nations of the earth and other places will be blessed. Okay, and I told you the blessings, Christ, and here it is. You and your heir, the heir is Christ, blessing the nations of Jacob wherever they're spread out, west, east, north, and south over the earth. Of course. Now, they were spread out because they were divorced, but either way, that's where they went. They were spread out. Now, how can you say we don't know where they are? Well, be also sure that I'm with you and will guard you wherever you go. Okay, so there's Christ the shield. So here he's saying, I'm Christ the shield. I'll guard you. I'll shield you, right? So, and he knew about Christ the shield, or like I said, Melchizedek, the king that would shield them, bless them, and all that kind of thing from Abraham. And now he's talking to them. I'll give you a quiet return to this country. So there's a prophecy. I'll give you a quiet return. So he knows he's going to leave. He's leaving, and that he's going to come back to his country at some future point, and that Christ is going to protect him on this journey and bless him. And he's going to have all these children. So here's his prophecy. He's in a dream. It's like, wow, I'm going to have all these children. They're going to spread all over the earth. I'm going to come back. Okay, it's all right there. For I will not forsake you. Right. In other words, I'm going to shield you. I won't forsake you. So don't worry. I'll protect you. I'm your shield. Till I've accomplished what I've promised. Okay. Well, all these things he's talking about promising is that his race will spread out over the whole earth. Okay? So that's all the way up. We're going all the way up to the second coming of Christ here because, you know, Christ sent him out. Told him, go to your kindred. Teach them that the first coming has happened and, you know, get ready for the second coming. So they had to go out all over the earth, search out these kindred nations of the 12 tribes to tell them about these prophecies that Christ had come and was going to come again. That's all part of this. That's why I say all this prophecy is all from right here. Okay, and he's looking at Christ at the top of the ladder, speaking to him. This part about him not forsaking him goes to Hebrews 13:5. So let's, I guess we've looked, oh, sorry, we didn't look at John 1:51. So, alright, so let's stop right there, look at John 1:51, start with that. Alright, 1:51. Alright, so we should notice that this is Nathanael answered him, you are the Son of God, you're King of Israel. So, okay, well, so Jacob would have known him as the king or king of righteousness, prince of peace, so however he looked at that, and he knew him as the shield by this point because he just told him twice he'll shield him on his journey and give him a quiet return. So he knew this king would shield him, and this was the same king that made his father Isaac, made Abraham younger so they could have his father. He knew all these prophecies and all these blessings that had already happened in the past. Okay. And then this is Christ saying, do you really believe? Ask Jesus, because I said I had seen you beneath the fig tree, which, you know, that's what he said to Nathanael. You will see far more than that. Most assuredly I tell you, he added, you shall see the heaven open and the messengers of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man, which we have as a quote to Jacob's ladder. Okay. It's Christ at the top, angels descending. In verse 18 through 22, we see Jacob's pillar stone, okay, which we haven't quite got there. We're only on 14. So as we go along, and then we're going to jump to 35. So we're going to take a big jump there. So it's fine. We'll get there. We'll see Jacob's pillar stone, which is where we get Christ the rock. Yeah. If you're looking up cross references for Christ the rock from the New Testament, they'll take you back to the rock of Oreb as the source of Christ the rock, because the rock of Oreb was next to Mount Sinai, and of course it still is, and it was split, and that's where they got a river, which formed a lake in that desert where they were. And of course you can kind of see where that was on Google Earth, I guess. So, and there's plenty of pictures on it, but it's just like a desert with rocks. Not much to look at. But if you got water, that's good. And they had a lot of animals, and who knows where all the food came from, because there was a lot of people by that point. People have said that, well, it had to be around 12 million people, possibly more. So it was a lot of people there that came out of Egypt. Plus there were some Egyptians that came with them because they could see these people were blessed. So they wanted to be part of that blessing, which is the whole point. That's what the 12 tribes, that's what God's chosen are supposed to be. That they're blessed for following God's law to the point that everyone else in the world wants to be part of it because they see that they want the blessing. If you don't want the blessing, then gee, that's not good. And a lot of people saw the blessing and still wanted to go back to Egypt, you see. So it just, some people, I don't know, you don't think it's important that, you care about your Creator, I guess. But Christ the rock actually comes from this vision of Jacob's ladder where he laid on this stone. It's the rock that Moses tapped twice. This is the rock that they carried with them during that trip, 40 years in the desert, and Moses would tap that. But when he tapped it twice, we know the story and we're going to see it later, he was barred from going to the Promised Land. So they got water as a stream from Jacob's pillar stone in the desert when Moses tapped it once as he was told to. Then the statement of God watching over him so he has a safe return, same concept, Christ the shield. Okay. Now I said 18 to 22, so we're going to go through chapter 28. Now, in 14 though, we have this quote from Hebrews 13:5. So we'll go look at Hebrews 13:5. Really close to the end here. Well, let's just start with 13. Do not neglect hospitality, by which means some have unexpectedly entertained angels. Well, how do we know that? Yeah, because Jacob's laying there looking at angels going up and down the ladder, and we already saw the story of the three men that came to Abraham, and he looks out and he recognizes obviously Melchizedek, and the other two are angels. And I said, but those angels ate his food. He goes in and has Sarah prepare this animal, and they cook up the meat and bring out biscuits and all this and give it to him under the tree. They sit there and eat all this meal, and yet we know those were two angels plus Christ, because that's who he recognized. Yeah, so you might unexpectedly entertain an angel and not realize what they are. Remember the prisoners as fellow prisoners, for you also are yourselves in the body suffering like them. Honor marriage with all in the undefiled union, for God will judge fornicators and adulterers. However, if you look up that word, that's in Exodus 20, it's about mongrelizing, so it's actually about mixed race marriages, not adulterers as we would think of adultery. Just look up the word. It's mongrelize. That's what it means. Okay? And even your own Bible says adultery, but then when you look it up, it's actually about marrying outside of the 12 tribes. That's what the problem is. So we just can't seem to teach things correctly. And be helpful, for he has said, I will not leave you nor ever forsake you. Right? Okay. And that quote is Deuteronomy 31:6. By which he encourages to say, the Lord is my help, I will not fear, what can man do to me? And that quotes Psalms 118:6. Right, so David understood the concept of Christ the shield. He talks about Christ the shield, Christ the rock, horn of salvation, the Redeemer. All those concepts are all in Psalms. So you understand that thought. He can go to war as long as he's doing, as long as Christ is with you. That's why he was willing to repent. Because that's how, if he didn't repent, then, that's what happened to Saul. Christ left and then set in this sin, in this demonic spirit, in other words. Remember your leaders who related the message of God to you. So that's 13:7. Hebrews. Imitate their faith after reflecting upon the result of their way of life. So if they do it correctly, you should imitate that, in other words. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Yes, He doesn't change anything in the New Testament. He just is trying to explain these prophecies to you from the Old Testament. That's all. Turn not to different and strange teachings. Well, that's what we get in church. But it's just because, for the most part, I think, they were taught wrong, and that comes up the line. I mean, just go up the line and see where this teaching come from that you get in church. Oh, we don't know where the lost sheep of the 10 tribes, we don't know where the house of Israel is today. We don't know who they are. They didn't know anything about Christ. That wasn't passed along. Yeah. Christ is not in Genesis. All we've been talking about is Christ. Okay. For we have not a permanent city here. On the contrary, we're in search of a future one. That's at the end of Hebrews. And so that's 13, 14, and 15 right there. Well, where does it say that? If you recall, that was part of this faith of Abraham, where he was looking for this future city. And that's back in 11:10. So if you just start about 11:8, by faith Abraham having been called. Okay, he was called by Christ, so he obeyed, proceeded towards the place where he would in the future receive his inheritance. He went, not understanding where he was to go. By faith he lodged as a stranger in the land of the promise, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the equal inheritors of the same promise. So, there you go. Promises passed down to the posterity, where he awaited the city, the architect and constructor of whose everlasting foundations is God. He's not waiting for Jerusalem. He's waiting for New Jerusalem. So he had a vision of New Jerusalem, not this old city over there that people are trying to claim that there's something important. Yes, it's historical, but the important part is whether you followed Christ or not. The ones that left that city, that continued to follow Christ, that were God's chosen, that's the important part. The ones that rejected Christ and still don't believe in Christ, how can they claim they're God's chosen? Well, they were taken out of the book of lives. It says this multiple times, and we get to those scriptures as well. We've already seen one of them, but there's other ones. Okay. We should be looking for New Jerusalem, and New Jerusalem is not in Old Jerusalem. New Jerusalem is defined as a 1,500 mile square in Revelation. Just read it. It's a pyramid. I'm arguing about the actual dimensions, whether it's 1,500 mile square or 1,200 mile square. So it's, whichever size, that size pyramid will not fit over Old Jerusalem. However, it would fit over top of the United States. That's interesting. Alright. So, there's your prophecy. Dust of the earth, stars of the sky, spread east, west, east, north, and south from the Middle East, in other words, to the four corners of the earth. Will be blessed by the promise, Christ the heir, protected by him on their journeys, which is the three manifestations of Christ, Exodus 4 and Genesis, fulfilling all biblical prophecies about them as the great Christian nation and the commonwealth of Christian nations. Because that's the prophecy. Alright, so that's Hebrews 13, 28. I said we'd go all the way up to 22. Okay, so talk about the ladder. We got down to verse 15. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep. That's 28:16. And exclaimed, the ever-living is certainly in this place. This is back to Genesis. And I knew it not. Yeah, well, okay. So I was afraid how terrible this place. Well, obviously it's not terrible. That's just the word it uses. terrifying. He's terrified. He just actually saw God, saw all these angels, so that's kind of terrifying. Okay. Is this not truly the house of God where he's laying? Well, okay, so he's laying his head on a stone and he says, I'm in the house of God, and there's no house, there's nothing, he's just laying on a rock on the top of a hill. And this is the gate of heaven, which is what he's really talking about. So he must be laying at the gate of heaven because he just saw the gate of heaven with Christ at the top. So he says, Jacob, however, slept till morning, so he went back to sleep, where he took the stone that he placed for a pillow and set it upright, poured oil on top of it, and consecrated it, and called the name of that place God's house. Actually, it's the stone, okay? And it's both. It's the name of the place, Bethel, and it's the name of the stone. But Luz was its formal name. So you might say L-O-Z or Endem-L-O-Z, or some say L-U-Z, so I don't know. At any rate, it was Luz before that. And Jacob vowed a vow, if the ever-living God is with me and will guard me. Well, he just told him twice he'd guard him in the way I go. In other words, shield him, as he did my forefather, obviously, Abraham. Give me bread to eat, clothing to put on, bring me back safely. That was the prophecy that he just dreamed, to the house of my father. Then the ever-living shall be my God. Well, yeah. And this stone which I place for a pillar shall be a house of God. That's the word Bethel. Okay? And of all that you give to me, all that you, so it's a prayer to this ever-living, in other words, which is Christ, I will return a 10th part to you. Well, why would he think that? Because he's thinking about Abraham, and the promise to Abraham, and how he's thinking now back to this story of all, I just dreamt this dream, saw these angels, and blah, 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 and they told me that, this angel at the top of the ladder told me he was going to be my shield, and that's what Abraham spoke about, Christ the shield, Melchizedek. So that's how he connects this idea about the 10th part to you. He's saying it's this person that Abraham also gave a 10th to, which was Melchizedek. So he's talking about Melchizedek right there. The shield, which he just said would shield him. Okay, that should be easy to connect the dots, but whatever. Alright, and then we go to 35:11. Two witnesses. That's what the two witnesses are. So, anyway, so we know a lot of this other stuff, but there is one thing about the fruit. Remember the fruit back in the Garden of Eden? Well, I mentioned this back there on another one about the fruit of the body, and that's 30 verse 2, about Jacob talking to his wife Rachel. Am I in the place of God to hold back from you the fruit of your body? So, fruit can be referred to as children, or it can be referred to as fruit, and it is in both, used both ways as a, I guess it's an allegory or whatever, an allegory of children then, versus an allegory, versus using the word for fruit being food. So it's used both ways in Genesis and the story of the Garden of Eden. Yeah. So then it gets into all the children with his different wives, which he ended up having 4 there. And then you just go on. 30, ever-living said to Jacob. So that's 31 verse 3, return to the land. I'll be with you. In other words, I will shield you, right? You already told him that. Okay, the God of my fathers is with me, verse 5. So that's 31:5. Okay. And of course he helped him with the sheep, and also so he basically gave him all these sheep. says, I raised my eyes in a dream, saw the rams leaping on the street. That's verse 10. And the messenger of God. So here again, he's talking to the same messenger. Said to me in a dream, Jacob. So call his name. Lift up your eyes, see all the rams. So that was, again, Christ giving them this idea that about the sheep. And that's how he ended up with all the sheep. But here's the important thing. For I have seen all Laban has done to you. And then verse 13, I am the God of the house of God. Well, wait a minute. He just said he saw an angel. Go back to verse 10. It said an angel. I raised up my eyes in a dream, and the angel of God said to me in the dream. That's how it started. Then you go down here to 13. That angel says, I am the God of the house of God. So that angel saying, I'm God. That's Christ. Again, Christ is commanding. Melchizedek, same thing. He's seeing this angel, same angel he saw at the top of the ladder. We haven't changed. Nothing's changed. Same entity. And it tells him, go from this country, return to the country of your kindred. Alright? So, he's relating these things that this angel, God appeared to Laban, that's 31:24. Guard yourself and what you do to Jacob. So even Laban was told, be careful what you do to Jacob. Because in other words, he's with Jacob, so. And he meant, truly there's a God who guides me from evil and acting with you. For the God of your father last night said to me, that's verse 29, guard yourself in dealing with Jacob for good or ill. Okay, so Laban recognizes God, and he's afraid to do anything wrong. So, at any rate, let me read all that story. But God defended me last night. 42. So that's Christ the shield. Okay. Then Jacob took a stone, set it up, and then they made it, called it the heap of evidence. That's verse 47. Witness this heap, witness this pillar. So it's a pillar of stones, verse 51. And then where do they get this idea in 53? God of Nahor, judge between us, the God of our father. So yeah, so they called on God to judge between them. Laban rose up in the morning, kissed his sons and daughters. But Jacob continued on his journey, and a messenger of God met him. Really? So that's chapter 32. Alright, so I should have, I guess, I meant to put that in here, and I'm going to have to add that. So let's just knock off here, because I have to add this part about this angel, because it's mentioned a couple times. So there's a few things here I just didn't get in here, and I'll have to add to this document. Yeah, I guess I should have known. Alright. Well, at any rate, we got 2 videos, and I'll add to this, and we'll come back with, I guess we'll be back on video 9 when we come back. So, thanks for watching.